Claire stood frozen in her own living room, her pulse pounding so hard it hurt to breathe. Her father's voice echoed through the house like thunder, sharp and cruel. "You and your kid are dead weight," he shouted, slamming his hand on the dining table. Her mother stood beside him, arms folded, eyes cold and unreadable. For a moment, Claire thought she hadn't heard right. Those words, dead weight, hung in the air, twisting her stomach. She looked down at her son Oliver, who stood clutching her leg, eyes wide with confusion. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew it was bad. Claire forced herself not to cry. She wanted to stay calm, to hold her ground. Her parents' voices blurred together, complaints, insults, reminders of every little thing they thought she'd done wrong. It was the same argument, only worse this time. Her father accused her of being ungrateful, lazy, selfish. Her mother didn't stop him. 6 months ago, they had begged her for help. Her father's business had gone bankrupt, and they'd lost their home. Claire hadn't hesitated. She had opened her doors, told them to move in until they got back on their feet. She had pictured family dinners, laughter, maybe even reconciliation after years of distant tension. She thought helping them would bring them closer. But instead, it brought out the worst in everyone. Her parents acted as though moving in was their right, not a favor. Her father treated the house like it was his. He rearranged the furniture, scolded Oliver for being too loud, and complained about the meals Claire cooked after long days of work. Her mother made cutting remarks about her parenting, her job, her messy life. Claire tried to stay patient, reminding herself that they were under stress. They had lost everything. She could handle their moods. But patience has a limit, and that night they broke it. The fight started over something small. Her father couldn't find the car keys. He accused Claire of misplacing them, and when she said calmly that she hadn't touched them, his anger exploded. The shouting began, harsh and personal. He said she had no respect, no sense of family. Then the words came out, those awful, unforgettable words. "You and your kid are dead weight." Claire's body went numb. Her mind raced, replaying all the sacrifices she had made for them. The bills she'd paid, the groceries she bought, the hours she spent cleaning up after them. And yet, this was what they thought of her. A burden, a mistake. She looked around the room. The home she'd built through years of struggle. Late nights, missed vacations, and quiet tears. Everything they used belonged to her, and still, they called her dead weight. Her father kept yelling, pacing the room, his voice rising. Her mother said nothing, only sighed, as if she were the victim of all this. Claire wanted to scream, to remind them that without her they'd be on the street. But something inside her stopped her. The anger that burned in her chest wasn't loud. It was cold, steady, dangerous. She realized then that shouting back wouldn't change anything. They didn't want to understand. They wanted control, so Claire said nothing. She just stared at them, her silence louder than their anger. Her son buried his face in her leg, and she gently placed a hand on his head. "Go to your room, sweetheart," she whispered softly. He hesitated, then ran upstairs. When she turned back, her parents looked at her like she had no right to be angry. Her father scoffed, muttering under his breath, "You see? That's the problem. No discipline, no respect. Like mother, like son." The words stung, but they also cleared her mind. It was like waking from a long sleep. Claire realized that she had spent her entire life trying to earn their approval, studying hard, working responsibly, raising her child alone with pride. But no matter what she did, it was never enough. They saw her not as a daughter, but as a failure. And now, they were living off the woman they'd always looked down on. Without a word, Claire walked past them and into the kitchen. Her legs felt weak, her hands trembling. She poured herself a glass of water and stared out the window. Outside, the night was calm, the moon bright, the air still. But inside her, something had shifted. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt invaded, poisoned by the people she'd tried to save. She heard her parents still arguing in the other room, complaining about how ungrateful she was. But their voices seemed far away now, like echoes from another world. She didn't want to fight. She didn't even want to cry. What she wanted was control of her home, her life, her peace. For years, she had believed forgiveness was strength. She had forgiven her father's temper, her mother's coldness, their endless criticism. She had told herself they didn't mean it, that they loved her in their own way. But standing there, feeling the chill of betrayal sink into her bones, Claire finally saw the truth. Love wasn't supposed to hurt like this. Her parents didn't see her pain because they didn't care to. They saw her house as shelter, her money as convenience, and her kindness as weakness. Every favor she did for them became another reason to criticize her. She had given them everything they needed, but in return, they had stripped her of peace and dignity. When her father finally stormed out of the room, muttering curses, and her mother followed, Claire stayed by the kitchen counter, her thoughts racing. She knew she couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. But what? She couldn't just throw them out, not yet. The idea felt too big, too cruel, even though they had been cruel to her first. But she could feel something growing inside her, a quiet, determined rage that refused to be ignored. That night, after putting Oliver to bed, Claire sat alone on the sofa. The house was silent now, but her heart wasn't. She thought about everything she had endured since they moved in. The passive-aggressive remarks, the slammed doors, the disapproving looks. She thought about the times she had cried in private, afraid her son would hear. Every memory built into something solid, a decision forming in her mind. She wouldn't yell. She wouldn't fight, but she would take back what was hers. Slowly, carefully. As the clock ticked toward midnight, she stared at the shadows on the wall and whispered to herself, "Dead weight, huh?" Her voice was calm, almost amused. "We'll see about that." It wasn't just anger anymore. It was clarity. For the first time in months, she saw a future where she didn't have to apologize for existing in her own home. A future where she wasn't afraid to take up space. The next morning, she acted normal. She made breakfast, helped Oliver get ready for school, and smiled at her parents as if nothing had happened. But inside, something new had taken root. She listened quietly as her father complained about the coffee being too weak, and her mother criticized her for spoiling the boy. But now, the words didn't hurt. They only fueled her resolve. She wasn't going to argue. She was going to act. Claire had always believed that revenge was a waste of time, something that only made people bitter. But this wasn't about revenge, not yet. This was about balance, about finally teaching them that kindness had limits. She didn't need to shout or slam doors. All she needed to do was take control of what was already hers. And she would. As she watched her parents sit comfortably in her living room, drinking coffee she bought, watching television she paid for, something inside her hardened. They thought she was weak. They thought she'd always bend. But they were about to learn that even the quietest person can strike back when pushed too far. For now, she said nothing. She just smiled, cleared the table, and went to her room. The plan wasn't ready yet, but it would be. In that silence, Claire made a promise to herself. They would regret underestimating her. She wouldn't scream, she wouldn't cry, and she wouldn't forgive. She would make them face the truth, slowly, painfully, and without a single word of anger. That night, for the first time in months, Claire slept soundly. The storm had passed, but the calm that followed wasn't peace. It was the beginning of her quiet revenge. The morning after the outburst, Claire woke up before sunrise. The house was still, but her mind wasn't. She made coffee quietly, her movements sharp and controlled. Every time she looked around her living room, the one her parents had claimed as their own, anger tightened in her chest. The same people who had called her dead weight were now sleeping comfortably under her roof, surrounded by the things she had worked so hard for. She sat at the table, staring at her cup, and decided that things were going to change. Not through yelling, not through tears, but through action. Her father always said control was power, and now she was going to prove that to him in a way he'd never forget. When her parents woke up, they found breakfast already made. Her father muttered something about the eggs being cold. Her mother said nothing. Claire smiled politely, took her son to school, and headed to work. On the outside, everything looked normal, but inside, she was planning every step carefully. She started small. That same day, she called her internet provider and removed the extra streaming accounts she'd added for her parents. When her mother tried to watch her favorite show that evening, the access was gone. "Must be a glitch," Claire said innocently. Her father grumbled, and they both blamed the company. Claire just nodded, hiding her satisfaction. The next week, she quietly adjusted the grocery budget. She stopped buying the snacks her parents liked, started shopping for essentials only. When her mother complained that the fridge looked empty, Claire said, "I'm just cutting back. Things are tight lately." That wasn't a lie. It was tight, but only because her parents refused to lift a finger or pay a single bill. Every small change gave Claire strength. It wasn't about punishing them yet. It was about regaining control, piece by piece. Her parents, however, noticed the shift. They sensed something different in her tone, her silence, the way she no longer argued. Her father became more irritable, barking orders and criticizing everything. Her mother became passive-aggressive, sighing loudly, muttering about how ungrateful children turn out. But Claire didn't respond. She kept her focus. At night, she worked late on her laptop, reviewing her finances. Every bill, every account, every detail of the house was under her name. She realized something powerful. They had no legal claim to anything. They were completely dependent on her. For months, they had made her feel small. But the truth was, without her, they had nothing. That realization became her quiet weapon. The emotional strain was real. There were nights when she almost caved, when she wanted to forgive them, when she looked at her sleeping son and wondered if revenge would make her a worse person. But then she remembered that night. The yelling, the humiliation, her father's cold eyes. The pain wasn't gone. It was buried, waiting for release. Weeks turned into months. Claire's plan evolved naturally. She stopped offering rides when her father asked to be dropped off somewhere. "Sorry, I have a meeting," she'd say. When her mother wanted new clothes, Claire replied gently, "We need to save money." Each time they relied on her less, their resentment grew, but so did her calm. Her parents tried guilt. They talked about all they had done for her as a child, about how family should support each other. Claire smiled, nodded, and walked away. Inside, she felt stronger than ever. She wasn't the same woman who cried in the kitchen weeks ago. She was in control, and that scared them. But the breaking point came when she received a call from her friend Mia. "Claire, there's a job opening at my company," Mia said excitedly. "It's in another city, better pay, housing included." "You'd be perfect for it." Claire's heart pounded. A new city, a fresh start, a chance to leave everything behind. The pain, the resentment, the toxic voices. But then reality hit. Her parents. What would happen to them if she left? Could she really walk away? That night, she sat on her bed long after Oliver fell asleep, staring at the job offer on her laptop. She could already imagine it. A peaceful apartment. Mornings without arguments. Evenings filled with laughter. But she could also hear her father's voice in her head. "You can't survive without us." It wasn't true, but it still stung. Her parents didn't know about the offer yet, but she couldn't hide her thoughts for long. Her mother noticed her distant stare during dinner and asked, "Something wrong?" Claire hesitated, then said, "I got offered a new job." Her father scoffed. "In this economy? You're lucky to have the one you've got. Don't make foolish moves." "I haven't decided yet," Claire said softly. Her father didn't let it go. "You'd better not. If you move, what happens to us? You think you can just walk away from your responsibilities?" The words made her grip her fork tightly. Responsibilities. That was the word they always used to trap her. For years, they'd made her feel guilty for living her own life. But this time, she wasn't a scared daughter anymore. Later that night, she looked at Oliver sleeping peacefully and whispered, "I'm doing this for us." The next day, Claire called her friend and accepted the job. She signed the papers, finalized the details, and booked the movers, all without saying a word to her parents. She didn't owe them that conversation. They had taken her peace. She was taking it back. Over the next few days, she prepared quietly. She cleaned her room, packed important things in boxes, and arranged for her son's school transfer. Each step felt like shedding an old layer of pain, but as the moving date approached, guilt began to creep in. She caught her mother humming in the kitchen, unaware of what was coming. For a moment, Claire hesitated. Were they really the enemy, or just broken people trapped in their pride? But the thought faded when she heard her father complaining again, about how she did nothing all day and owed him respect. That was the reminder she needed. 2 nights before the move, she decided to tell them. She gathered her courage and walked into the living room. They were watching television, bowls of chips in their laps, acting like everything in the house was theirs. "I wanted to let you know," Claire began calmly. "I got a job in another city. I'm moving out next week." Her mother's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "You're what?" Her father turned off the TV, his eyes narrowing. "You can't be serious. You're leaving us here." "This house is mine," Claire said, her voice steady. "You'll need to find another place to stay." Her father laughed bitterly. "You think you can just throw us out? After everything we've done for you?" "I'm not throwing you out," Claire said softly. "I'm just taking back my life." Her mother shook her head in disbelief. "We raised you. This is how you repay us?" Claire didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She had begged for understanding once, but they'd answered with cruelty. This time she would answer with silence. She turned and walked to her room, her heart pounding. Behind her, she could hear them arguing, not with her, but with each other. They were scared, confused, angry, but for once, their emotions weren't her responsibility. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. Her decision felt heavy but right. For years, she had believed that forgiveness meant peace, but sometimes peace required distance. She wasn't taking revenge to hurt them. She was doing it to protect herself and her son from more pain. The next morning, she woke early and packed the final boxes. Her parents avoided her, too proud to admit fear. When the movers arrived, Claire guided them calmly, her face unreadable. As they loaded the truck, her father finally spoke. "You'll regret this, Claire. Family doesn't abandon family." She looked at him, tired but firm. "You abandoned me long before I made this choice." Then she walked out the door without looking back. The drive to the new city was quiet. Oliver played with his toy in the back seat, unaware of the storm his mother had just survived. Claire felt the weight of the past lifting slowly, replaced by something lighter. Freedom. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like dead weight. She felt alive. The morning sun spilled through the new apartment's window, lighting up boxes stacked against pale blue walls. Claire stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the city wake. The sound of traffic, the distant chatter, even the smell of fresh paint. Everything felt new, different, free. Oliver played quietly on the floor, his laughter light and easy, untouched by the storm his mother had left behind. It had been 2 weeks since they'd moved. 2 weeks since Claire had walked away from her parents' house, her house, and left behind the people who once made her feel worthless. She had imagined that freedom would feel like relief, but instead it came with silence. A heavy kind of silence that followed her everywhere. Her parents hadn't called. Not once, no messages, no apologies. The quiet was both comforting and painful. She knew her decision had hurt them, but she also knew staying would have destroyed her completely. Still, the memory of her father's last words, "You'll regret this," echoed in her mind when the nights grew too still. At work, she was focused, sharp, and respected. Her new job had given her the stability she'd always wanted. She was good at it, and for the first time, people valued her without making her feel small. Her boss trusted her colleagues liked her, and her paycheck finally matched her effort. On paper, everything was perfect, but every success reminded her of the people who had never believed she was capable of it. One evening, after putting Oliver to bed, Claire sat on the balcony, scrolling through her phone. She came across an old photo, her parents smiling at her graduation. She remembered how proud they'd looked that day. Somewhere along the years, that pride had turned into bitterness. Maybe life had hardened them. Maybe losing their house had made them cruel. But even if she understood it, she couldn't excuse it. Still, a part of her wondered if cutting them off completely was right. Revenge had felt powerful in the beginning, but now that the anger had cooled, she could see it differently. It hadn't been about destroying them. It was about reclaiming her life. But was there space for forgiveness in that? Her thoughts were interrupted by a message notification. It was her mother. The first one in weeks. Claire hesitated before opening it. "We're struggling. Your father's been sick. We can't pay rent. We need help." She stared at the screen, her heart sinking. A part of her had expected this moment, but not so soon. Her hands trembled slightly as she reread the message. The same people who had called her and her son dead weight were now reaching out, not to apologize, but to ask for help. She put the phone down and closed her eyes. Every emotion she'd buried began to rise again. The humiliation, the anger, the sadness. This was her moment of power. She could say no, ignore them. Let them feel the same helplessness they had forced on her. For once she could be the one in control, but then Oliver's small voice broke her thoughts. "Mom, who are you texting?" he asked sleepily from the doorway. She forced a smile. "No one, sweetheart. Go back to bed." He nodded and went back to his room. But his innocent question lingered in her mind. What kind of example was she setting for him? That pain should always be returned? That love was something you earned only by suffering? The next morning, she couldn't focus at work. Her mother's message replayed in her head again and again. She remembered the cruel words, but she also remembered her mother's soft hands when she was little, the way she used to sing while cooking. She remembered her father teaching her how to ride a bike, cheering when she finally did it without falling. Those people were gone, but maybe deep down, a part of them still existed. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table and drafted a reply. She wrote, "I can't let you live with us again, but I'll help with some expenses until you get back on your feet." Then she deleted it. She didn't owe them anything, she reminded herself. Yet, as she looked around her tidy apartment, she felt something twist inside her. Revenge had given her strength. Forgiveness might give her peace, but peace didn't mean letting them hurt her again. It meant choosing boundaries without cruelty. 2 days later, she drove back to her old neighborhood. She hadn't planned to, but something inside her pushed her to see for herself. Her parents' new place was a small, fading house at the edge of town. She parked across the street and sat in the car for a while, debating whether to knock. She wasn't there to make peace. She just needed closure. Before she could decide, her father stepped outside, slower than she remembered, holding a trash bag. He looked older, tired, not the angry man who had shouted at her months ago. Her chest tightened. He didn't see her car, just turned back toward the door. That's when her mother appeared, holding the door open for him. For a brief moment, Claire saw something unfamiliar. 2 people who weren't proud or loud, but quiet and humbled. She drove away before they noticed her. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was clear. Revenge wasn't what she wanted anymore. What she wanted was to stop carrying the anger that had followed her for years. That night, she sent the message she'd written earlier. Simple, polite, nothing emotional. "I can help with a few bills. I hope Dad feels better. Take care, no apology. No reopening old wounds. Just a bridge, not strong enough to invite them back, but strong enough to stop the hatred from spreading further." Her mother replied a few hours later. "Thank you. We didn't mean what we said that night. Your father regrets it. We both do." Claire read the message twice. She didn't believe every word, but she appreciated the effort. For the first time, they sounded human. Not judgmental, not superior, just flawed people facing the weight of their choices. She responded simply, "I know." Days turned into weeks again. The distance between them remained, but it wasn't sharp anymore. They exchanged short messages now and then, updates about Oliver, questions about her father's health. The pain didn't vanish overnight, but it softened. One Sunday morning, while Claire and Oliver were eating breakfast, he looked up and asked, "Mom, are Grandma and Grandpa still mad?" She smiled gently. "No, honey, they're not mad anymore, and neither am I." He grinned, satisfied with the answer. and went back to his cereal. But for Claire, those words carried weight. She realized she had finally forgiven them, not because they deserved it, but because she deserved peace. That afternoon, she took Oliver to the park. The sky was clear, the air crisp. She watched her son run across the grass, laughing freely. For the first time, she wasn't haunted by memories of what had happened. The past was still there, but it no longer defined her. Later that evening, as she tucked Oliver into bed, he asked quietly, "Mom, what's dead weight?" Claire froze for a moment, then sat beside him. "It means someone who others think isn't useful," she said softly. "But it's not true. Everyone has value, even if others can't see it." He nodded sleepily. "So we're not dead weight?" She smiled. "No, sweetheart. We never were." When he drifted off to sleep, Claire stood by the window again, looking out at the city lights. The woman who once stood in her kitchen, broken and humiliated, was gone. What remained was someone stronger, someone who had faced pain, chosen strength, and found peace without destroying herself in the process. Her revenge hadn't been about punishment. It had been about reclaiming control, and forgiveness, quiet, cautious forgiveness, was the final step in that journey. Claire knew her parents might never change completely. They might never fully understand the pain they caused, but that no longer mattered. She had chosen her own path, and this time, it was one built on peace, not payback. As the night deepened, she whispered to herself, "I won." Not because she hurt them, but because she refused to let them keep hurting her. In that quiet apartment, filled with soft laughter and new beginnings, Claire finally understood the truth. Real revenge isn't about making others suffer. It's about proving you can rise without them, and that's exactly what she had done.